Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Coach's Journey podcast. I am here with Robbie and Alex Whitten for part 2 of what to do when the business of coaching feels too hard. Now, you don't really need to listen to them in order, but there is a part 1 if you want to go back and find that. And there probably will be some overlap between the 2 episodes. But hopefully we will still bring you loads of value, and there'll be plenty of things for you to take out of both episodes. So I shall just hand over to Robbie to say hi.
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. It's great to be back here. And I was thinking as you were saying that, I know we're planning to kind of cover everything we've got for now in this episode, but I wouldn't be surprised if we end up doing a part 3 at some point, because this is the driving question of the coach's journey these days. When we've thought about what are we here to do? Well, we're here to help people not quit because the business of coaching feels too hard. And that doesn't mean we can make the business of coaching easier for everyone, although we might be able to for some people, but it does mean we can give that grounded sense of it does sometimes feel really hard. Also, I'm excited because I entirely forgot last time we did this that I actually have a whole book called How to Keep Going When You Want to Give Up. And because I was so much in the thinking about the new book, I'd completely forgotten the old books. So I'm hoping that I'll remember that a bit more in this episode. But it was really nice. I was just looking back through it before we jumped on this call, and in a way it is my favorite of the 12-minute method books. And maybe we'll get into that and why it is and what about it is meaningful. But this topic of what do we do when things feel hard and how do we keep going? It's a meaningful one to me. And so I'm really glad we're back here talking about it.
Yeah, definitely. Do you want to just mention the other book, or the book that's in your brain at the minute?
The new one, yeah, it's not as much in the brain at the minute because I was supposed to basically finalize it a few weeks ago, and I had perfectly aligned with it. I came down with what I'm pretty sure is COVID. And it was actually worse COVID than I ever had during the pandemic. So it was great because I was super ill, in bed all week, with 2 ill little girls as well. We had a lot of fun watching an absurd amount of Bluey and the Wiggles,
Yes,
and Jojo and Gran Gran. So I didn't have to cancel any meetings, but I also lost that entire week. So I can't give as much as I might have been, but probably it'll be out by the time you're listening to this. And in a way, it's my attempt to hold together what it's like, what happened for me in my quarter life crisis, and what it's like to reform a worldview into a new way, and a whole bunch of ways to do that, to think about things in new ways and create new mindsets. And the book's called The Power to Choose. And so we'll do something longer about it, I'm sure, on the show at some point. But the idea in there is that we have far more, when we come to a certain point in our growth and development, we have far more ability to affect our experience by choosing the ways we think.
Yeah, awesome. I'm really pleased. I didn't know that, because I remember you sending me the first half of that when we first started talking to each other.
Yeah, it's out there on the first half. I mean, it's which is mostly the same, but I mean, all the bits that are there is different. You can get the first half on robbieswale.com for free, and that's going to stay there. But a draft version, which I put out in the pandemic, because in some ways it's about how do you create a mindset that's more fit for uncertainty and complexity. And it's fun that you asked about it as well, because this is really the first time anyone's asked about it at this stage when I know it's actually going to come out. And because I haven't started doing any, marketing or anything for it as we record this. So it's nice to try and describe it. And I'm actually going to use my ChatGPT marketing consultant. One of my plans is, once we've finalized the book, is to get it to start helping me think about how to capture quite a complex book in a way that I can say, this is what it's about. And with my other books, I did that by appearing on a lot of podcasts, practicing over and over again until I got pretty sharp at doing it. But this one, I think, is harder to describe, and also I want to get there faster. So that was a good first practice.
Awesome. Excellent, Robbie. Thank you very much. And Alex Whitten, hello. You always get your surname, don't you, with Coach's Journey, because we have another Alex.
But we had a wonderful Coach's Journey community call. I reckon, Alex, you've been a member of the Coach's Journey community for, what do you think, 3 years?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure on every other call before this one, there has been another Alex. We have an absurd number of Alexes who have been members of the Coaches Journey community over the years. This on Tuesday this week, as we record, there was only one Alex. It was weird for all of us.
Which actually did mean that when Robbie went Alex, I had to pause to wait for any other Alexes to speak. But yeah, lovely to be here. Two thoughts instantly come to mind. One being, before recording, we were talking about what some of the practical things that we'll get to help with difficulty. But one of them does maybe feel like read the book that's going to come out, because when it's like, what's the mindset for uncertainty and complexity? That's really the mindset that is probably going to be most valuable in running a coaching business or creating anything that's yours that you want to grow and build. But also, as you were talking, Robbie, it made me think in terms of, and we like, man, this is part 2, and man, there's probably going to be more of these because there's always going to be difficulty and challenges. But actually, listeners, send us your difficulties or challenges, because it's wonderful to, well, not wonderful to hear you're experiencing difficulty, but to hear the range of experience and collectively, can we think of ways to navigate that? So I think it's hello@thecoachesjourney.com. I've almost always also wanted to go listeners email in, so I've now managed to tick that off, but would genuinely value that. Yeah.
Long-term ambition of yours. Yeah. And just to say, to make that really real for people, check out the writing page of the Coach's Journey, the YouTube page. There are videos and articles on there that are prompted by subscriber and listener questions. So, we take that seriously and we listen to it, and it does inform the work we do. And it's a nice reflection, Alex, on the book, The Power to Choose, because I think it does give us that sense, and hopefully I think we got into both of these in the last episode, but we'll hopefully get into both again today. When something's hard, I really think there are 2 approaches, right? One thing is, can we practically change what we're doing to make things easier, right? And then the other is, can we change how we relate to the whole situation so that it feels easier, even if it may not change at all in the outside world? And The Power to Choose is mostly about that latter one. It's like, what are the unconscious assumptions we're making? What are the unconscious ways we're thinking about things? And what if we changed those? And so I think we got into that in a few different ways in the last episode. And yeah, let's get into it in this one.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I've got a list which is kind of taken from Alex's wonderful summary that he put on our WhatsApp chat. But I think I'm going to dive straight in with what to do when... I'm going to dive straight in with the business of coaching feels too hard when you are doubting yourself. So what are your ways of dealing with that? How does it show up? I guess we just kind of riff on that, don't we? So I will, because I've been invited to talk a bit more this episode, guys. Can you believe it? I will talk about how that doubt shows up for me, which is about feeling that people around me and close to me think I should get a proper job, whatever a proper job is. And when I feel people around me don't understand what coaching is, and maybe that means I need to get better at talking about what coaching is. But those are the things that kind of niggle and push my buttons as far as I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to get a proper job. As for how I deal with those, usually it's by having a really good coaching session, as in me being a coach with a client. And quite often I can have a really good session and I come out of my office and I see my partner and I go, that's zone of genius shit right there. And then I feel better and remember why I do it. And I think it's noticing those moments and cherishing those moments, so you can reflect back on those when it's feeling difficult. So that's my two penneth for self-doubt. I'm sure I've got other stuff, but that's what kind of sprung to mind. So I don't know if either of you want to carry on from there.
Yeah, one really practical thing that I do, which kind of works, is I have a Word document which is pinned to Microsoft Word, so if I can get into it really easily. And it used to be called something really boring, like Testimonial Bank, and I would put all my testimonials in there. And now it's called You Are Amazing, Robbie, Don't You Forget That. Or something like that, because I was like, I need to, like, Testimonial Bank doesn't do the job, because the job that I'm trying to do there is, like, have some evidence that I can look at and try and ground myself in the moments of doubt on, well, what, like, and I find it really hard, like, this stuff doesn't penetrate my heart very easily. You know, I read someone else's testimonials and I'm filled with envy about how amazing they are. And I read mine and I'm like, yeah, but it was actually better than the way, you know, no matter what the person has described, it's like, I was there. I remember how it felt. It was zone of genius shit. And no words can ever describe that. But, you know, that these days when I'm thinking about it now and I think about that, although in the moment, I don't remember a moment where I was like, do you know what I'll do? I'll go in there and I'll read it and then I felt so much better. But the kind of overwhelming body of evidence, like 10 years I've been doing this now, it's a long document now. And I try and put it in there when somebody, you know, writes me a nice message about the podcast or writes me a nice message about the book. One of the books, I often put it in there as well as a way to kind of just really ground myself in, okay, yes, there are people around me who don't understand this. There are lots of people who think coaching is nonsense. Even, like, I had a conversation with one of my former clients yesterday, really, really funny, amazing guy. He was like, can I tell you my hobby horse about coaching? And then he kind of did a little mini rant, and I quite agreed with him on some of the stuff for a different episode. But there's lots of people who, even though he'd paid me quite a lot of money to coach him, and then he'd done an absurd amount of coaching with me, you know, in terms of hours, people still have questions about it. And so grounding yourself in the impact is one thing I do. I got to say, like, people who are into Enneagram, I'm a kind of Enneagram type 6. And so, you know, like St. Thomas would have been Enneagram type 6, right? Doubting Thomas, right? And so it's like, I'm full of doubt. I live my whole life on doubt. I don't know anybody. I mean, I don't know because you don't hear it from the inside because the doubt is all inside. But I don't know anybody who doubts and questions things as much as me, right? It probably makes me a good coach. But it's like, I'm not certain about anything. And it's a tough way to live some of the time. And it does mean that I've kind of sat with this stuff a lot. And even despite that, you know, it has gradually changed for me with a whole set of, as the things we've been talking about, practical stuff like keeping that testimonial bank document and the mindset stuff we were talking about, like just questioning it, just like, you know, okay, but what's the reality here? What is a different assumption I could make? And then just to catch the thing, we talked about it a bit last time about people around us not understanding coaching or kind of wanting us to get a real job. We were talking about this a bit on the Coach's Journey community call this week. I think I talked about it a bit last time, you know, as well, this idea of when we're early on with any creative project, and this goes into all the 12-minute method stuff for me, which is all about how do you get creative things off the ground. It's really fragile at first. And actually, you've got to be really careful who you surround yourself with when you've got this, like, last time I used the metaphor of like a tiny little plant growing, but I was thinking as I was listening back to our last conversation of like just a little candle flame. You know, if you even like you accidentally sneeze after you've just lit a candle, right, you can put it out. And we've got to be really careful with that and who we spend time with at those times. But one move, if you want to, which I think helped massively with my now wife, but obviously then, well, not obviously, but then girlfriend, understanding coaching is, so if people around you don't understand what coaching is, you could get better at talking about it, Ruth, or you could coach them. And then they'll have some feeling. And if you don't want to do that, you could probably find a friend who will be up for it, especially if we tell everyone, any friend who's listening, that coaching more people is the best way to grow a coaching business. So there's loads from me. I obviously jump back in if you want, Ruth, or what's up for you, Alex?
I mean, yeah, there's so much from both of those things. I think as you're talking about your experiences of sort of, being kind of like inherently doubtful, Robbie. It does make me think like there's that really fine line in the so like doubt can be a useful thing, and so it's then like when is this serving me, and when is it not? Because it's yeah, like, and the difference between sort of like blind faith and taking like a leap of faith, because actually, and knowing again when to like stick or twist in how we're doing what we're doing, because I think for me doubt can show up in well, it's interesting how the doubt has shifted. So doubt used to be around my ability if I got a no from someone, but almost always now my sense is either I didn't necessarily present coaching right, or actually like probably wasn't right for us to work together at that point in time, and ultimately like they still know that I'm a coach and where to find me, and it's almost always never about me in those cases. So that's been like become easier to navigate, and that's in part because I've built a body of work that reminds me of, similar to you, Robbie, having an evidence bank, which as someone who is very good at self-criticism, my supervisor was like, you should really do this. This might be helpful. And then after, 3 times of them suggesting that, I finally did it. And it is really helpful. But what helped me as well is that I've had feedback both from clients and other coaches who I've like facilitated with to go, yeah. And I think having that ultimately validation in some ways is useful. And instantly I kind of like check myself, go, do I want to say that I found validation useful? But actually like it's like okay to know we need that, because almost we're kind of doubling down on the doubt if we're like, oh, I can't get someone else's validation to prove that I'm good enough. I just have to wait to like believe it myself. And then we're going to be stuck there. But so that really helped or helped like navigate the no's or but also, I think there's like sometimes now the self doubt is more in like both the like two things, well maybe three actually. One is, and you kind of spoke to it a little bit, Robbie, like the industry is coaching is such a broad term and means a lot to everyone, and sometimes the doubt can be like what you understand it to be and what it is for me and how I do it probably very different, and so it's sometimes the self doubt is the worry of being like lumped in the wrong camp, which only I can control. Well, I can't control how they perceive me or it, but again, it's how do I present coaching, but also what's their experience of it, and both those things can be true. But and like and also because personally, like, and I think we mentioned this in the previous episode, this challenge of doubt can also come from believing in like the value of coaching, and I don't necessarily always doubt that, but I sometimes doubt that like the word coaching isn't the best word for it because of all the associations that have been created for better or for worse about it, and so like navigating that, and then that final point on the methods, like I've just over a year working full time in coaching as kind of like my main source of income, or the thing I spend most of my time doing, and so there's a lot of novelty still, and sometimes the doubt is actually just, oh, I'm doing a new thing and I haven't seen it work its way out to like its end result, and so it's learning, but I haven't been in an environment or system where like the learning has been so self-directed, other than in coaching, because you go from like institution to institution where yes, you're learning, but probably within a framework. As a I'm not going to get it right, but I read something like in a Joseph Campbell interview that was really great, where it's like you get a teacher who teaches you the rules, so that only in knowing the rules can you learn, like choose whether to use the rules or be used by the rules. And it's kind of like first, then it's like, well, what are the rules of how this works for me? Yeah, I'll pause there because I realised that I got excited and said a lot.
Thanks, Alex. I think there's a lot to say about it, isn't there? And I think just as a closing thought, like I think it's important that you surround yourself with the right people, and if you can find that person who is your cheerleader, as cheesy as that sounds, but the person who, when you talk to, reminds you about who you really are and what you're good at and what what a difference your work is making, you know, having those conversations with people can be really helpful and kind of getting you unstuck. So I guess my advice would be kind of make sure you've got that person or seek that person out. Are we okay to move on from self-doubt? As always, I'm very conscious of time.
Let me just put one last, maybe two last things in, just to respond to a couple of things that have come up there. So one is this question of when is doubt useful, which I think is a great question, right? My permanent doubting means I'm permanently asking things, which means I'm never accepting what is the case, what people say is the case as the case, because I'm always asking it. And that's a great quality as a coach, right? When Robert Holden gave me some mentoring on this, he said, yeah, in the end, sometimes though, as somebody who doubts a lot, you have to choose some things to believe in. You have to find those things and choose them. And I think that is with that power to choose frame in mind as well, that is a valid thing. Like, yes, okay, you may not know for sure that coaching works, but it might be worth you just choosing to believe for the next 6 months that coaching works and letting go of the rest of it. The other thing about doubt that I was just thinking is back to this thing that, like, one of the bodies of work we develop as we go on, this is why coach is the best advice, is we develop a body of evidence inside us as well, which we might call confidence, right? So, like, remember that courage comes first, confidence comes after. So it's like, actually, you have to be brave. You don't know if things are going to work. You have to do them anyway. You have to keep going sometimes, even though you feel lots of doubt. And after that, in different ways, that builds up. Like, every time someone pays you a new fee, every time you do some coaching, every person who says, wow, that was a great coaching session, thanks. Every time you get the zone of genius feeling. Like, one of the ways through self-doubt is to just keep doing stuff.
And just quickly to jump in that, like, the repetition really helps, because maybe the way to distinguish it, is this doubt me or is this doubt in the situation? And because, like, part of it is, learning in the unknown and the uncertain. But actually, because like, if I wasn't running a coaching business, I probably would still have probably 50 to 90% as much doubt as I currently do. It would just be in a different context. So it's just being aware of, like, is this because I'm learning a new thing and therefore my learning process involves doubt, because it's like, I have a persistent fear of failure. So will I get it wrong? And what's that mean for me? But already you can see half of that's an internal narrative that's just self-doubt. And so being aware of that's not going to change if I suddenly went and sold shoes. And I think that's worth thinking about. So, and not only when's this doubt useful, but how is self-doubt serving me in terms of, like, as a defense mechanism is probably the other thought as well. When is it? Because if I'm always doubting, I'm probably 10% less likely to do some of the scary things that actually would probably both disprove the doubt, but would be more vulnerable as a result as well, and potentially, like, great for the business. And like, when you're talking about, like, kind of choosing and sticking with it feels really important. Without going into the philosophy of it, there's this really nice idea I heard on a philosophy podcast, where a philosopher, in terms of talking about, like, a framework to create a meaningful life, they came up with the idea of, like, silence, obedience, and joy. And it's like, the silence is take some space to think about what are the things that feel important to me, like, and how can I pursue them and in what way, and then obey them, like, create the parameters and just obey it. And because I think, personally, I'm very good at going, right, this is my plan for the next 3 months. And within day one, I'm like, oh, is this working? Well, it's like, oh, obviously I don't know that yet because it's day one. So, like, obey it. Don't question it until you get to that end point. And then give yourself some more silence. Go, well, how has this really gone? But importantly, the joy part is, like, has this brought me the joy I hope it does? Because if not, then what should I do differently? And we can link to the podcast that says far more, like, in-depth stuff about the actual philosophy, which I've potentially butchered. But, this is the great thing about almost everything, is probably what we'll take away from this won't be anything we said. And that's totally fine.
Oh, well, I really like that. Silence, obedience, and joy. I mean, obviously the rebel in me went, fucking obedience. And then I realised it's okay because I'm just kind of obeying what I've decided. Yeah, I like that. Thanks, Alex.
Hi everybody, just a quick thing before we get back to the show. If you like what you're hearing on this episode, the chances are you'll love an introduction to the coaching business Flywheel, a free ebook available at thecoachesjourney.com. It's the most important piece of content I've ever created for coaches, boiling down everything I've learned from this show, from working with master coaches and from my own experience into one simple model. The model not only tells you the only things you have to do to have a sustainable coaching business, but also shows you how they can form a virtuous circle that keeps your coaching business growing. It's all free, and you can find it at thecoachesjourney.com. There's a link in the show notes. Now, back to the show.
So it feels like a kind of natural transition from doubting yourself is to the idea that the business of coaching feels hard when you are questioning your tactics / out of alignment with yourself. And I think on that, I would just talk about Instagram and my relationship with Instagram. So most of the work I do is with women. And for quite a lot of years, I still have an Instagram account for my coaching work. But the more time I spent on Instagram, the more time I felt that there was just a lot of content aimed at women not being enough. Whether that's, not healthy enough, not strong enough, not whatever enough, that I then kind of started to feel that I was part of the problem. I was posting content that I hoped was helpful and would connect with the women that I wanted to work with. And I was always very conscious that I didn't want that content to make women feel like they were less than. But the more I kind of got dragged into that, and then knowing what the algorithm, trying to feed the algorithm, it just felt so draining. And when I spoke to friends or people that I know consumed my content, they all said, no, it's great, and it's not like that, and it's really useful and interesting. But I just couldn't get away from the fact that it just felt a bit crappy and a bit, to get the reactions, to get the interest, you either had to be kind of controversial or it just felt totally out of alignment. So I haven't done it. I haven't put anything on my coaching Instagram probably for over a year. And it's not to say that I won't. But the minute I can kind of let that go and then not beat myself up about, well, you've not updated your Instagram. It makes life feel easier. It makes the business of coaching feel easier. So I think that's what I would offer around alignment and kind of tactics that don't sit right.
And it sounds like you're saying, I just want to check this, that one of the things that made the business, it's kind of what we said last time, this thing like out of alignment, the way it showed up was one of the things that made this thing about Instagram make the business of coaching feel harder is you had this like tension between like, I kind of should be posting on Instagram, this other part of you that really didn't want to, and then maybe a third part going, why aren't you posting on Instagram? Like, get to work. Like, you're wasting your life. You're going to fail as a business person if you don't get on Instagram. And this whole like tangle that if you just choose to not, it sounds like you just decided, I can't be in alignment on Instagram right now. And you got off, and that made things easier. And I guess the follow-up question is, did it have any effect on your business to not be on Instagram, do you think? I don't know. But
no, because that was the other massive like realization was I've been on Instagram for like 5 years and it's never bought me a client. So clearly it wasn't working anyway. So So yeah, it was just like I could get out of that tangle of you've got to post on Instagram, you can't have a business if you don't post on Instagram. You know, I don't want to be part of the problem in businesses selling to women. You know, the way they make us buy stuff is by making us feel shit. So I didn't want to be in that. And also just like the constant creation and having to come up with stuff was really draining.
Yeah, I mean, we could have a separate one about like social media tactics, creativity tactics. The thing I want to catch is, well, two things probably. Well, that thing you said about the business is pretty stark, about the impact of social media. And if we go back to what is the great contribution of the Prosperous Coach book, you know, one of them is getting people off social media, stopping people thinking that that's the way to grow a coaching business. And if you look at my framework on this, the coaching business flywheel, crucially, it definitely does not say that one of the 5 things you have to do to have a sustainable coaching business is Instagram. Now, there are ways that those social media can help with that, but you've got to be sure that's the right way to do things. And then just the last one for me on creation and social media when it comes to that. Yeah, I think it's a really important point. I basically made the choice pretty consciously after thinking about it quite a lot and writing about it a bit and thinking through my values around creativity and social media, that I would rather have fewer people read my LinkedIn posts than contribute to the kind of pollution of everybody's psychology by the doom newsfeed. Now, it's a little different because it doesn't have that particularly kind of, I mean, like horrible thing that happens with the kind of that particular kind of inadequacy marketing that, like you say, is often really leveraged against women. But I think it's the same thing. You know, we have these weird news feeds that we talked about last time, often just make us all feel uncomfortable because of what everyone else is doing. And my decision was only, like, I think there is a reasonable, you can make an argument that there is a responsibility if you have values around integrity and authenticity or honor or honesty, or any of those things really, that if you're going to be on social media, you have to not be part of it. You have to not let yourself get sucked in by the clicks and the likes. You have to just make a thing that's useful. But then the separate part of it is, those things aren't necessary. You know, social media is not necessary. Very few things are actually necessary to have a coaching business, and getting to doing ones that aren't necessary and that drain you of energy and that make you doubt yourself, it doesn't sound wise. So it sounds like a smart move to get off.
So I jump in there.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a great bit in my interview with Ashana Crichton, where she talks about she used to write a blog post once a month. I can't remember what for, some sort of like publication. And she was just like, it took me probably like more time and effort than it was worth to write 300 like words than it did to go to like 3 or 4 events that I found really joyful. And I think like that can often be one of those moments where it feels too difficult because we're learning like how to run a coaching business or how to run any business. We also have to answer what's the Venn diagram overlap? Like what do I enjoy doing? Because ultimately, like, there's many ways to create a sustainable business, but almost all of them require us to keep doing the same things to sustain it. So if the things to sustain it are killing us inside, well, we're going to constantly be killing us inside. And to appreciate that, like, I know some coaches who, Chloe Garland's a great example, actually. She used to post, I think, a video a week or on LinkedIn and generated a load of like interest from that. That's where one of her first like organizational clients came from. She talks about that in the podcast. And it was really interesting because she just really enjoyed doing that. And she talked about stuff that she was interested in. And I think that's really important, is like, she did the things she enjoyed, whereas in the Jenny Bird episode, which is more recently coming out, she talks about she went to loads of networking things because for her it was about creating like meaningful relationships over time in a way that interacted differently. And that's not to say that either is better. It's just they're different ways, and it's learning to find the way that you most enjoy, because there's going to be enough things that are difficult in the context of personal growth. So don't force yourself to do things that are difficult that don't need to be. And yeah, while that felt like a good point to finish, I often like to continue talking. Like which is, it's funny because I think I just forgot the thing I was going to say. But is it going to come back? No, it's not. We'll come back to it.
Robbie, if you got anything to add on all of that.
Yeah, like probably two things. So as usual. So the first one is, I think there's an important move that what you just described about Chloe there, Alex, is really present too, right? And it's the same with you, Ruth. Like if creating the content hadn't been a drag, this wouldn't have been a problem, right? If creating the content had been something that gave you energy and you loved doing for Instagram, like the whole that kind of weird internal cycle that you had wouldn't have been happening. And one of the things that you two or regular listeners will have heard me say a lot is I think that when we there are probably one way to think about something like a coaching business is there are two moves. There's knowing the tactics that work, and then there's doing them in such a way that you can, as you said, Alex, keep doing them. And so the move is I make the distinction between goal work and soul work. So we can have something that is 100%, we're just doing it for the ends. I'm just doing the Instagram because I think that this is how clients are going to be created. But if we're just doing that and no clients are created and we hate it, this is a bad state of affairs, right? The outcome is everything. So we have to, if we find a tactic that we decide we're going to trust, the move then is to get it into alignment with ourselves so much that doing the thing in and of itself feels like worth it. So basically the making of the video for Chloe sounds like it was worth it because she enjoyed it. And she was just talking about what she was thinking about anyway. And even if no corporate client had come from it, she'd have probably enjoyed doing that. And that move, which I think we can do with anything. We can find the way that it aligns most closely with who we are. We can make it more authentic to us. That's part of the way that I think that my work with coaches and things like the Coaches Journey community is what it's really about. It's like, how do we help somebody find the actual way for them to reach out to this particular organization? Not the way that everybody tells them to do it, but the way that is in alignment with them enough that they can trust it and do it, even though it's still scary. And then just to hold us on, because part of what you said at the start, Ruth, was about alignment. And I think, a good question, a good alignment question, it would be, which is a values question, is what would you have to do about this thing such that regardless of the outcome, you'll feel at peace with yourself? So is it like, how would you have to do Instagram so that regardless of which clients come, I'll feel at peace with myself? That gives you a sense of how do you get it into alignment with your values? Because really what that's asking is, what are my values in this situation? We could talk more about that if we want. But the other piece I wanted to find was, one thing for me that really changed doubting my tactics. It doesn't stop me doubting them, but it tells me what to do when I doubt my tactics. As I said a bit last time, is get really clear and potentially public on what you believe the best tactics are. So interestingly, once the coaching business flywheel is there, once I've said that, I have some certainty after that. I doubt hugely going up to it, right? And then once it's out, now I know kind of what to do, what I really believe. And I had to really check, do I really believe this before I publish that? Because when you publish something, the more permanent you make it, so, book is higher than ebook is higher than blog post is higher than tweet, right? But the higher up that is the more certain I've found I have to be about the thing in order to publish it. And then once you've got that, actually on the other side, things do get a bit easier. And that same thing happens when running new training or whatever it might be.
Okay. So we're done on tactics and alignment. And I mean, obviously, like you say, we could keep going. But yeah, certainly just to kind of close it off. And I guess you might have both already kind of said this, but just because it's hard, it doesn't mean it's worth doing.
But importantly, it's also to say, just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Like we have to hold that paradox at the same time, that how hard something feels doesn't really tell you much about whether it's worth doing.
Yeah, so that's where the values piece, I guess, comes in, isn't it? Because when you just said, like, what would have to happen for me to feel good posting on Instagram, even though it's not going to bring me any clients, like, not do it. That's what has to happen.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's clear. I think you've done that values work already on this. That's why you sound so clear about not being on Instagram.
Yeah.
But if I think like, one of the things that comes up for me with that is like, if I'm going to be posting online, and regardless of the outcome, a really important thing is that I don't compromise who I am in the posts online. Like, I don't want to be compromising who I am all the time, a bit like you were saying, writing posts in certain ways to try and get a certain person to do a certain thing. But if I can't control the outcomes, which I can't, then I really don't want to be doing that, because it breaks into some of my values.
And I think that also we should mention then like what we say yes to and when, because there will be potentially like bits of work that feel important to say yes to because we need the income, but actually are they like, what will they take for us to do, and actually what will the long term outcome of them be as well. And I'm always reminded of I think two things. One, that Rich Lippin thing of, if this person you're speaking to, like your next prospective client, needs to be your client, you should probably get a job, because are you showing up in a way that means that you can like ethically make that, like support them in a way that goes, yes, let's work together, versus no, I need you to work with me. And also that is totally okay, that there are times where if it feels difficult and that's for a financial thing, like, then what do you need to give yourself like the support so that you don't compromise your values? And if that's to find alternative source of income, then that is great. And I think there's a challenge in like the coaching industry where an expectation that, the people who are like, lots of coaches are full time, whereas someone quoted like an ICF report, and it's over 90% of coaches say that they have a separate source of income other than coaching. And that might be coaching related, like supervision or training and things, but it can be totally unrelated. And it feels like if more people knew that, that might be useful. And I even remember, I've said, because it was one of the most recent episodes I was involved in, but like Patrick Quentin Smith was like, the advice I'd given myself when I started now is just get a part-time job, because it would have made it feel easier.
Yeah, and there's a really nice bit when Henrietta Nelson came on the show a couple of years ago, and I remember somebody writing to me straight after and being like, I just loved it because it just gave me permission. It's okay. And Henrietta had kind of struggled with it, as I remember it, to come to terms with, I coach part-time. That's what I want. That's what it's like. And I think you're right. It is, it's a really important thing and a great frame.
Yeah, and Rebecca Norton is another great example of that. Like with Alex Swallow, she both coaches and does social prescribing, which I mentioned because it's also really interesting.
Okay, well, we've kind of branched off into finances, so I think we'll kind of naturally move on to like what to do when the financial pressures are making the business of coaching feel hard. Yeah, there was a couple of things that sparked off in my brain there, but I think I'm just going to try and formulate those things and hand over to you guys on like what, when the business of coaching feels difficult, when there are financial pressures outside of the business. Is that what we're discussing?
For me,
or I guess it's both, isn't it?
When my life finances aren't adding up, the whole thing feels harder, or don't feel like they're adding up, right? And an important thing to say about this, there's a chapter about this in the Keep Going book. There's this research that I heard quoted where they do it with like sugar farmers in India who get almost all their income at one point in the year. So just after they get that, they're at their wealthiest. They've got like in their bank account, they've got the whole money for a year's income. And then just before they get all that money, they've got almost no money. And one of the thing that just blows my mind, so one of the things they did is they did, I think, numerical and verbal reasoning tests with the farmers at different times in the year. One when they've got abundance of money and one when they've got scarcity. And they score worse on the reasoning tests in scarcity. So there's just this really important thing to say that psychologically, we are likely to be less skillful when we're feeling the financial pressure. So if things are feeling hard when the financial pressure is on, that makes sense because we're humans. So I really wanted to say that. And then the other insight that I've had about money over many years is my fears about my finances always feel worse than the reality, no matter how bad the reality is. I.e., the action that is always worth doing for me, it'll be different for other people, I'm sure, but for me, the action that's always worth doing. So I had this, I can't remember if it's in that book or a different one, but I had this experience where I was asking myself this question: what is one thing that drains me of energy that I will stop doing this week? And one week I said, worrying about money and doing nothing about it. And as soon as I started doing even a tiny thing, the energy drain of it was completely different. And certainly every time I force myself to be black and white about money, again, it doesn't really matter how tough the situation is. It's less scary than me just kind of going round and round about the fear.
Yeah, that's good. And just to add to that, I've realised that doing those finance jobs, whatever they are, you know, HMRC or, you know, just I hate picking up the phone, basically, especially to talk to a bank or a credit card company or whatever. So I know that if I start my day off with one of those jobs, it is going to totally drain me. So I might as well do one of those jobs when I'm already drained, tired, and low energy, because it doesn't require me to have, you know, positive energy and feeling good. And I also know that if I'm feeling crappy afterwards, that's okay, because my day's over and I can go and sit on the sofa and have a glass of wine or whatever. But obviously, invariably, annoyingly, you actually feel better for taking that action or making that call. Just annoying things like setting up direct debits with car insurance companies, you know. But I've really learned now that those things are end of day jobs. Obviously, everybody's different, but that was just something that sprung to my mind when you were talking.
Well, I was going to say, actually, I mean, people are different, but Dan Pink did a piece of work on when he thought people, I can't remember what the book's called, but he thought people paid a lot of attention to how we do things, but not when we do them. And he said there are several patterns, and there's a bit of research disputing some of this, I think, but there are several patterns that people fall into, and the most common one is that the graph of our energy in our day, I'll do it on the video, it kind of goes up and then crashes and then back up again. So that in the morning we have increasing energy, sometime in the afternoon it crashes, and then it tends to come up again. That's why it's good to have a nap early afternoon, because you do it in the energy crash and you smooth that curve. But he recommended exactly what you say, Ruth, like, and that's the most common one. There are other ones people could look up, Dan Pink, but we'll put a link in the show notes, I guess. But his recommendation was do creative tasks in the morning and do admin in the afternoon when you're already drained and you don't really have any creative energy or willpower left. So that sounds like a really smart move. The thing I wanted to say about money as well that I didn't touch on, so because I was back in the Keep Going book this morning before this call, like, one of the reasons it's my favorite one is in the publication of it and then the kind of promotion of it. I felt I learned some really important things, and one of them was I became obsessed with the tortoise and the hare. So the tortoise and the hare now shows up in all my coaching and lots of podcast episodes and things like that. And really, what the Keep Going thing taught me, if I think about 12 minutes a week, 3 years, 80,000 words, it's like, in the end, tiny action every week grows into something magical. And then if you pair that with really believing in practice, i.e. the more we practice something, the better we get at something. If you know you're going to keep going with something essentially for decades, even a tiny bit a week, getting a tiny bit better every week, then in the end, when I was really getting into that book, it changed how I thought about so much, because it made so many more things possible. If I know I'm not going to quit, I'm going to keep going even a tiny bit, and I want to get better at tennis or whatever, and I'm going to practice tennis every week, and I know I'm not going to quit, I'm going to give it decades, then I know by the end of that, I'm going to be pretty bloody good at tennis. Now, we're not talking about that here and what it means, but what it means for us financially is, if we take the pressure off it being the full-time earning, that would be a kind of Liz Gilbert big magic lesson. Day jobs get a bad rap. why should we put the pressure to pay our mortgage on this really precious calling we have? So if we take the idea that having a job or a second source of income is a bad thing, i.e. we're a failure if we have a second source of income, and instead we think, I'm in this for the long term, or I want to be in it for the long term, I'm most concerned about the long game, and we feed, the flywheel in my metaphor, or that we water the plant every week in some way, 1 day a week, half a day a week, a few hours a week, in the end, things will build up. And that's in Collins's flywheel, metaphor. Sometimes companies have to push the flywheel, companies in his idea, coaches in ours, for a long time before, with a lot of struggle before they see it spinning on its own. So I think like having a source of income that is sustainable and regular, that means we never slip into that scarcity where we can't reason as well, and where we can, in the meantime, be continually feeding the future potential of our business. That's a really wise tactic. Like, I'm super glad that it was a bit accidental. I didn't have all this reasoning at the time. I just knew that I couldn't. It was too big a risk to go full-time from full-time employment to full-time coaching. But I'm very glad to have had that 18 months of working 3 days a week. And then, one of the things that moved me to full-time was seeing a couple of potential coaching opportunities. Neither had come in by the time I left that job that could be a kind of coaching day job, associate work or a particular project that would take away that scarcity and the total risk. So I guess, I'm doing a hard sell on, you brought it in, Alex, from Patrick Quinton Smith, but I'm doing a pretty hard sell now on, full-time coaching is not necessarily a wise, smart thing to do unless you've got a bunch of backing for it.
Yeah, and I think just to complicate things even more, I got to a point where I felt that I was that set on the fact I needed a part-time job that was actually where I put all my energies and all my time, to the point that a friend of mine who I always asked to be a referee, she was like, I'm not doing it anymore because that isn't what you want. You don't want a job. So, and I'd said to her, because I'd had a day of proactivity and, sending kind of cold outreach emails, but slightly warm. And I'd had, basically had a client out of that. And I said to her, next time I ask you for a reference, can you just remind me to send another 10 cold emails? So I think it's that paradox again, isn't it? And I think it's knowing what's going on. Because really, I kind of wasted about 6 months, I think, looking for a part-time job, instead of pushing the flywheel.
Yeah, and I guess I think those two things do actually dovetail. They sound at first like they're contradicting, but I think that the crucial keep going lesson from the 12-minute method for me was, am I writing one 12-minute article every week, even the weeks where things feel really hard? So in the coaching business world, that would be, or in my way of looking at the coaching business, that would be, like you say, am I putting some just enough energy into the flywheel every week, even though I might need to be spending 4.5 days looking for a job, because sometimes that's how much the pressure might be, and if we've got responsibilities, we have to do it. But am I still, if my plan long term is still coaching, what is just enough to be doing every week?
Yeah, and just to jump in there, because I think there's so much. Like, it reminds me of your episode with Ellie Scarfroof in terms of the value of the systems that allow you to hold yourself accountable, because it's that, can we create the plans when we're in that better headspace, and then stay consistent to them? And you've referred to this in the last episode that we did, to check back to that. And it's about doing those things when it's good and it's bad, and if we can't do them when it's good, then we're probably taking on too much as well. So it's like, are you still able to send some like invitations or whatever things that you do to, and the analogy that comes to mind is like it's the planting seeds one. It's like you're depending how you want it to work. Some people might go, I'm planting seeds and then I'm harvesting and then I'm planting seeds. But like I know that how I work is that I always need to be doing a bit of both, because when I'm harvesting, I'm enjoying like the crop and what it brings me, and that gives me the energy to go, oh, I definitely want more of this. And then like what are the things that are tangible and found in reality that you can then look at when it feels difficult. So for example, the best time for me to think about finances is when I'm looking at my like budget spreadsheet, not when I'm in the shower. And yet sometimes I find myself doing it the wrong way around, and every time I go back it's like, oh, this isn't as bad as I ever thought it was. It might not be good, but it's better than I thought. And then it's also going, and have I been like, if it's not as good as I want, have I been doing the things that I know will move it forward in the long term? And I like to add to that as well, like, what's the expectation? I had a really great session with a coach who helped me see that like maybe I do want a farm at some point, to go back to the planting seeds analogy, but right now it's just about having a really lovely garden where, you know, the veg patch is something new for me, so I need to bear that in mind and how I approach that. But then it's like sometimes it's about like mowing the grass and planting a few seeds, but really that analogy is about like what's the scale of this and how does that also affect how you're thinking about it. Because like I think there is like, one of the things I think that stands out in almost all episodes of the coach's journey is that there is an element of it being a long game. Like the longer you are coaching, the more people who will experience your work, so who are more likely to either recommend you or come back for more.
Okay, well, that's kind of a perfect segue to where we agreed to round things up. It's almost like you were in on the plan, Alex. So I think we all felt it was really important that we made sure we gave kind of some real tangible, practical hints, tips, advice on how we keep going when you're stuck and how we navigate the business of coaching feeling so hard. So building on what Alex said, I would recommend absolutely listening to my interview with Ellie Scarf. And really, it was kind of discovering Ellie's work that shifted me into a better place in order to take action around business development. And it's about creating systems that make, like you've said, Alex, that make that business development easier when perhaps you're not actually feeling 100%. So for me, it's setting targets and then tracking them at the end of the month. And keeping my targets visual and on the wall so I know what I'm doing. So when I sit down and if I'm a bit tired, actually, I just need to send 5 invites. Or actually, I just need to send 5 follow-ups. And Ellie Scarf has an episode on her podcast called The Funds Are in the Follow-Up, I think. It's called something like that. And it's about how important it is just to follow up. Instead of us being sensitive, lovely coaches who go, oh, I don't want to bother people. No, they might just need a nudge. So I have a little chart like this on my wall that kind of sets out how many people I'm going to connect with, how many invites. So this month I've got to send 20 invites, 30 follow-ups. So it's there, it's visual, it's easy when perhaps my brain is elsewhere. And then the geek in me quite enjoys filling out the spreadsheet at the end of the month. And if I've hit my goals, I get to highlight it in green, which is really exciting. And if I haven't, I can highlight it in red, which still feels a bit exciting. But I think, and it's taken me a while to refine what works for me and for ages, I had like a little tracking thing on a page of a spreadsheet, but I never looked at it. And it was kind of spending some time actually doing that and putting those systems in place that I actually now enjoy updating them and setting my goals for the month. Like, for various reasons, I know that September is going to be quite a slow month for me. So I've reflected that in my targets. So it is just about making it work for you. But again, and I mentioned it in the last episode, you know, James Clear's Atomic Habits, and he has a version of it that he's written especially for business. You know, all those things are really useful, making it obvious, make it appealing, make it rewarding. So that's what I'm going to leave with, I think. So I will hand over to you, Robbie.
Yeah, it's really nice. So, okay, like, yeah, I think we've touched on this a little bit, but if I was going to give one piece, again, a thing that I'm really glad I did, it's kind of a thing that's in the Prosperous Coach. It kind of overlaps with the Zone of Genius ideas, Gay Hendricks, and kind of put them together. So one of my favorite bits of the Prosperous Coach is this bit where they have, I think it's 2 rectangles, one for the business of coaching and one for coaching, and says that most people treat them separate and they love the coaching one and hate the business of coaching. And the aim with the Prosperous Coach in that book is to make those boxes overlap as much as possible. So make the business of coaching as much about coaching as possible. And when coaching is something that gives you energy, makes the whole business feel less hard, makes you believe in coaching more, all the things we talked about coaching more over this episode and the last one, the more your business development can be about coaching, the less hard the business of coaching is likely to feel. And there's loads of stuff in the Coaching Business Flywheel Booster Pack. You know, there's templates in there people can use to just create more coaching conversations. And of course, we've given loads of ideas on this show and beyond. And then just to build on that one further, really what that is about is, can we make the business of coaching something we love to do? And most coaches love coaching. And so a good shortcut to that is just make the business of coaching about coaching. But as you were talking about the examples with, who was it, Jenny and Chloe, Alex, it's like, if you love networking, do networking, right? If you love making videos, make a load of videos and then tie that into business development. And that could be the Zone of Genius. So this is this Gay Hendricks idea, and we can link to a summary blog that I wrote about it a few years ago, that there might be a load of things that you love and are good at that also create loads of satisfaction and abundance in your life. And the piece of work is identify it and then do it as much as possible and make it all the parts of your business you doing Zone of Genius work as much as possible. This is a great thing to take to a coach, you know, both understanding the Zone of Genius and then, oh man, how can I make doing my accounts a bit more Zone of Genius? Or how can I make, you know, like, just be creative with that, like take it everywhere. And, you know, that's my writing. As soon as I started, that was one of the moves I did. As soon as I started making the writing reflect my understanding of my Zone of Genius, the writing got better. And in fact, that was partly how I defined it. Like, my best articles, what was I doing then? That felt Zone of Genius. Similarly, coaching, how do I be more me at my best in my coaching? The podcast, like, how do I make sure that when I'm doing these interviews, and this was tough early on, I'm being me at my absolute best? And just keep iterating that. And then the more you can make the business of coaching using your strengths, using your Zone of Genius, the less hard it should feel. That's a kind of, what would we say? It's like a logical following of that. So there's me. Alex, what are you noticing?
Yeah, I think I'll add 2 or 3 more. One is what we've talked about, like, do the numbers as well. What do you want by when, and what does that mean? And I think so that could be like, oh, I want to earn X amount and I want to charge clients X, Y. That means I need to have Z number of clients, which means I need to invite X number of people, and work that out, because it makes it far more real and helps you think about how then might I go about this. The other one that comes to mind is actually from when I worked in the charity sector, and we got some support from a fundraiser, and they said, whenever you get a unsuccessful grant application, do something that gives you the sense that you're winning again. And that doesn't have to be like a specific fundraising thing, but it's the same. Like, when it feels difficult, what can you do that reminds you of like your qualities or just gives you some energy back? Whether it's like doing something that you really love doing or speaking to someone that just like gives you that energy, or tasks that instantly gives you that boost. So find that. And then that final one is, it comes back to science, obedience and joy. Like that, but both like give yourself the permission to give yourself the time to like work these things out as well. Like no business, well, I'd say most businesses probably don't do the thing that they start doing when they become really successful or sustainable. And you know, there's the startup mantra of like fail fast, and it's like bandied around probably in an unhelpful way, but actually it's like, yeah, because in doing that you're learning quickly, and so yeah, give yourself that permission to, I think, like be playful. Or as you know, Robbie, you often quote the art of possibility, like I'm probably not going to get quite right, but like it's like don't take things so goddamn seriously, because yeah, unless you,
that's exactly right. That's exactly the art of possibility.
Unless you want, obviously, to be like have a really seriously sustainable business, achieved in a really sustainable manner, then yeah, maybe don't take it so seriously.
Well, what a brilliant note to end on. Don't take yourself so goddamn seriously. Except I'd probably say don't take yourself so fucking seriously.
Now we have to make it an explicit episode, Ruth. Look what you've done.
Yeah.
Oh, that happened so long ago. I was thinking, Ruth, were you just too tired last time to swear?
No, I
You were really
definitely
tired
did swear last time, I'm sure. Well, I think for sure at some point there will be a part 3, and I quite like the idea that part 3 could be based on what listeners have found difficult or when they find the business of coaching difficult. So definitely fulfill Alex's dream and email in with your suggestions and examples around times when the business of coaching feels hard. So really, all that's left to do is for me to say goodbye, and I'm going to hand over to Robbie and Alex to say goodbye as well, like we're in a little chat show, daytime chat show or something.
That's goodbye from me.
Oh, that's it. I was like, what is the thing? Yeah, goodbye from me too. Thanks so much, Ruth. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Ruth.
Thanks, guys.
Hi everybody, Robbie here again, and just a few quick things to share with you before you go on to the rest of your day. Thanks for getting all the way to the end of this episode. I'm imagining that means you think the work we're doing is important and valuable. Well, we think so too. And if you loved this episode, I want to tell you about 2 other things I think you'll love. First, my free ebook, An Introduction to the Coaching Business Flywheel, which you can get at thecoachesjourney.com. It's my attempt to boil everything I've learned from my years supporting, coaching and interviewing coaches about their businesses into one simple model containing the fundamentals of any sustainable coaching business. The only things you have to do to have a sustainable coaching business, and the things that if you don't do them, you can't have a sustainable coaching business. Get it for free at thecoachesjourney.com. And second, you might be interested in the Coach's Journey community. It's my flexible, affordable group coaching program for coaches. You pay between £20 and £100 a month and get access to a certain number of group coaching calls each year, plus some one-to-one time with me if you're a full member, and various other benefits. And of course, you get the chance to be connected to other amazing coaches on their own journeys, and you can join and read testimonials and much more at thecoachesjourney.com/community. Thanks so much to everyone who has supported the Coach's Journey over the years, but in particular, thank you to Alex Whitten, Alan Bedding, Jessica Jem, and Nikki Marsden. Thank you for listening, and we hope to have you back with us on the Coach's Journey podcast sometime soon.